call for the 8th company because we need some assault marines. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where we're continuing our look at the old school fast attack units from the Space Marine Codex. We've been going through the Space Marine Codex datasheet by datasheet and rule by rule, seeing how to get the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. In this video we'll take a look at the Assault Marines datasheet, what role they're best suited to on the battlefield, any way that we can improve the units with characters and stratagems, and how I would use them on the tabletop. Assault Marines are equipped with jump packs, and they bound across the battlefield in great leaps of blazing fire, hurtling down on the enemy and often crushing the foe as much from their impact as from any of the nasty close combat gear that they're armed with. They'll often deploy from low orbits from Thunderhawk gunships and can support a Space Marine drop pod assault as further reinforcement from the skies. Let's see how these power armoured murder machines perform on the tabletop then, and we'll have a look at their datasheet. At base, the Space Marine Assault Squad is comprised of 5 models, a Sergeant and 4 regular Marines. They're a fast attack choice for Codex Space Marines, and they'll cost you 12 points a model before other upgrades. That does not include a jump pack in the price. You'd have to buy that separately at an extra 3 points per model. At base, each model is equipped with a bolt pistol, chainsword and frag and crack grenades, and they have the standard Space Marine Tactical Squad style profile, 6-inch move, weapon skill and ballistic skill 3 up, strength and toughness 4, 1 wound, 1 attack, leadership 7 and a 3 up save, and the Sergeant has 1 more pip of attacks and leadership as per normal. They can include up to an additional 5 models in the squad at 12 points per model if they have no jump pack, and 15 points per model if they do. They've got a datasheet with quite a lot of options. The Sergeant is very flexible indeed. He can change out his bolt pistol for a weapon on the melee weapons list or the pistols list, or can change out his chainsword for an item on the melee weapons list. He can also have the option to take a combat shield or melter bombs. The combat shield is just 1 point per model, so in my mind it's a bit of a take or leave situation. It has a small chance of saving the Sergeant if he happens to be hit by a heavy high AP weapon, but of course as it's only a 5+ invulnerable save, it will have no effect at all if he is targeted by a weapon that's AP-2 or worse. I'd say for just 1 point it's a bit of a take or leave. It's not going to make any difference either way, and you might well just forget that you have it when it comes to that important roll, if it ever even happens. Either way, for 1 point it's not really a big deal either way. Melter bombs aren't too bad as a little extra shooting option for 5 points additional. They're a 4-inch range grenade with a strength 8, AP-4 and damage D6, and you can re-roll the wound roll if you're attacking a vehicle. So if you are tooling up an assault squad to go and charge the enemy, for 5 additional points, this one might well be worth it, just to give them a little extra sting before they even reach close combat. I find it interesting that as you can swap out his pistol for a melee weapon, you can actually take 2 chainswords on the Sergeant for free if you want, so that's just an interesting little way that you can get 4 attacks out of your Sergeant base, and 5 for shock assault, should you want to. If you weren't planning on giving him anything else, and you are planning on getting the squad into close combat, and if you aren't, then why are you even taking an assault squad? Then it's probably worth it over the bolt pistol, though I admit it would probably look a little bit silly on the model. Otherwise, you can certainly go to town on him with all sorts of different power weapons. Thunderhammers and power fists and power swords are all decent, and you essentially get a pretty reasonable return on the damage output to the unit based on how many points you spend on the weapon. I would personally be most tempted by a power fist or thunderhammer to give the squad a little bit of extra punch against heavy hitters. 2 of the regular squad members can take plasma pistols at 5 points per model. This isn't actually too bad an option if you're thinking about dropping the squad in from deep strike, guaranteeing they'll at least get 1 shot off with the plasma pistols before they go down. You really would have to think twice about overcharging though, because rolling a 1 and losing a 17-point model is a bit grim. They'd be better suited if you were dropping them in with a captain nearby or something like that. Additionally, instead of a plasma pistol, those 2 Marines can opt to take a flamer, replacing both their bolt pistol and their chainsword. So this is a little bit of a bummer, as you probably want to be keeping the squad's combat potential. So losing attacks isn't the best really for the flamer. Maybe I'd consider it if I was playing as Sallies, or with the successor chapter that gives them long-range marksman for an extra 3-inch on the flamer weapons, so they can drop in and fire it as soon as they come down from reserve, but otherwise I'd probably leave it. For every 5 models in the unit, 1 model can take an eviscerator, which is essentially a power fist with an extra AP-1. It'll give you strength times 2, AP minus 4 and damage d3. Unlike Power Fists, you subtract 1 from the hit roll when using it. I believe the way that this is worded, you can take this on the Sergeant, at the expense of his bolt pistol and chainsword. I would certainly only take it on the Sergeant, because paying 11 points for this is nowhere near as much worth it if you're putting it on a standard Marine with 1 attack compared with the Sergeant for 2 attacks. As it is, it's pretty much balanced with the Power Fist. You get the extra AP minus 1, but that's only going to be useful on some targets. I'd probably just go for the Power Fist myself, particularly as it doesn't replace the bolt pistol. And finally, we have the option to take a jump pack. You've got to take it on every model if you're taking it on one model, and it's 3 points per model. It'll increase their movement to 12 and give them the fly keyword. Unless you have a special way to deliver them, then I'd probably usually take the jump pack. The squad has a bunch of special rules. Angels of Death is the staple. It'll give them Shock Assault, which is very useful for getting into close combats for +1 attack when they charge, and Combat Doctrines, of which the most useful is going to be the Assault Doctrine for these, so an extra AP minus 1 by the time you get to turn 3. It's a bit late in the game, but as these guys can start in reserve via Jump Pack Assault, you could keep them off the board until that time. Talking of Jump Pack Assault, that's their rule for setting up off the table, and you basically come down in either turn 2 or turn 3 greater than 9 inches away from the enemy. This would be one to consider whether you want to do it at the start of each battle. Different armies might be better to have them on the board to counter-attack, or some might be better to have the assault squad come in as harassment units behind enemy lines. Finally, they can combat squad, meaning that they can break down into 2 5-man units if you field a 10-man squad. So overall, Assault Marines are a squad with a decent number of chainsword attacks that will best excel in fighting light infantry. They can be quite flexible, either starting on the board and using their decent movement with the jump packs to get up, start off the board in Deep Strike Reserve and come in and try and charge from 9 inches away, or potentially ditch their jump packs and maybe start in a transport to make their way up the board. Let's have a quick look at how the different chapters might benefit them. As assault specialists, White Scars have some of the best synergy with assault squads. Being able to advance and charge is a really nice bonus, so they have a very high threat range of 12 inches plus d6 inches plus being able to charge the 2d6 inches after that. So on average that's over a 22-inch threat range for them being in close combat. Being able to fall back and charge again also helps them be a really annoying disruption unit, meaning that if they connect with their charge and don't kill it, they can fall back out of combat, use their jump pack large movement to fly somewhere inconvenient, and maybe put the hurt on some backfield enemy infantry or heavy support units that really don't want to be being chopped up by chainswords. White Scars also have a helpful stratagem when deploying from Deep Strike Reserve that for 1 command point allows them to roll 3d6 and pick the 2 highest for their charge, and this greatly increases the odds that they'll make it into close combat. Raven Guard are another really solid pick with Jump Pack Marines. Being infantry, they'll often activate their bonus of being harder to hit when in cover, as they have a whole host of stratagems that can buff the charging or movement options of Jump Pack units. Shrike himself can also buff these guys, and if you'd like to find out a bit more, I have covered the Raven Guard stratagems in depth in their own Codex review, so feel free to check out that after this video if you'd like to know about more of their options. It's worth thinking about successor chapters with these 2 primary codexes. There are traits such as Hungry for Battle, which is +1 to advance and charge, and Whirlwind of Rage, which is extra hits on 6s in close combat, that both can really soup up Assault Marines to the next level. You could use these 2 traits in combination with a base White Scars or Raven Guard army to have some abnormally hard-hitting Assault Marines. Blood Angels are also worth noting. They have a lot of synergy with jump pack units, and +1 to wound on the charge is absolutely brutal on a lot of low-strength chainsword attacks. These guys will happily be wounding rhinos and the like on 4s on the turn they charge, and the Blood Angels have stratagems that allow jump pack units extra mobility and a very reliable charge out of Deep Strike, provided you spend a couple of command points. Iron Hands can also up their durability a touch, which doesn't hurt, and Salamanders or Master Artisans will really soup up any fancy close combat weapon that you give the Sergeant. It's far more worth it to give the Sergeant, say, a Thunderhammer in a Salamanders or Master Artisans army, because being able to reroll 1 hit and 1 wound massively ups the damage output of a strong weapon with a few attacks. Salamanders could also help out if you're putting some flamers in the squad. Finally, Black Templars are very good for charging out of deep strikes, as they naturally get their full reroll charges. This means that the assault squad is much more reliably going to get that crucial charge off on the turn that they drop, giving them all the best chance of putting some witches to the bolter and chainsword. Let's have a quick look at characters now, and assault marines have a decent synergy with a bunch of these. Obviously, dropping in alongside a captain and lieutenant with jump pack will increase their damage output. Some various warlord traits out of the supplement books can increase charge ranges. I believe that the White Scars have the Plume of the Plains Runner that you could put on a character nearby them to give them a boosted charge. Talking of charge boosting, chaplains could also be handy. You'd have to start the chaplain on the board, but if you moved a chaplain with the jump pack up to the site where the assault marines are about to drop, use that litany to give them +2 to charge, then they're far more likely to get in out of deep strike. Chaplains could also be useful for buffing the squad once they are in combat, by giving them those full rerolls to hit in close combat. I believe the White Scars Librarian also has a power to boost charges, so that's an option for buffing them up too. For Blood Angels, they synergise quite nicely with the Sanguinor, who provides them an extra attack amongst other things, and some of the Blood Angels named chaplains can be very nasty too, in combination with deep strike units. As well as the Codex specific stratagems we've already mentioned, there are a few out of the main book that can be very useful. A command point when rolling that crucial charge distance can't go amiss, particularly if you roll a 6 on one dice and say a 1 or a 2 on the other. The difference between getting into close combat and not is quite big, so that's well worth a reroll. As you can potentially take quite a big squad of these, you should consider Honour the Chapter for 3 command points to allow them to fight again if you really need to be blending a big horde of orcs or something. That is quite pricey however though, so it might be worth it to spend it on some bigger, harder hitting units. Jump pack units can access the Hammer of Wrath stratagem, which when you've made a successful charge with a jump pack unit, for every model within 1 inches of that unit you can roll a 5 up, and if you're successful, then that unit suffers a mortal wound. Now on a big unit of assault marines charging, this is actually worth doing. If you get all 10 into close combat within 1 inch of the enemy, then you'll on average be doing over 3 mortal wounds to the enemy, and usually paying 1 command point for that privilege isn't too bad. You might want to consider what targets you're using it on though, as if you're just charging something like Guardsmen, it might well not be worth it. But if they've just charged something tough, like say an Eldar Flyer, an extra few mortal wounds could really help tip the balance on whether you kill it or not. So how would I go about fielding an assault squad on the battlefield? My first step would be to look very hard and consider whether or not I wanted to run them as Vanguard veterans instead. I really like Vanguard veterans as a unit. They get access to storm shields and get an extra attack on their profile for just another couple of extra points. This means that they can be a lot more durable and more fighty than assault marines point for point. So in a lot of cases I'd be tempted to run them instead. If you were running assault marines however though, say to fill out a detachment, or because you like the unit, then how I would run them would change depending on how they fit into the rest of the army. If I was playing something like White Scars or Blood Angels, and I was going to plan on dropping them in and using a stratagem to get them into close combat, I'd be tempted to take a full meaty big unit of them, 10 men, and perhaps a Power Fist or Thunderhammer on the Sergeant. If you're going to be spending command points on them, you need to be getting the most value out of those command points, and that means making a big unit get into close combat rather than just a small unit. On the other hand, if I was looking to run them as smaller units that are independently harassing the enemy, I'd say something like Black Templars would be pretty decent for this. Then I wouldn't overinvest in the squad, I'd run them as 5 men, and maybe just take the extra chainsword on the Sergeant if I wanted to absolutely max out the number of attacks I got. Black Templars will be quite good for this strategy, as they're able to get themselves into close combat with a fairly high degree of reliability, without having to rely on stratagems or other investment to get them into close combat. When it comes to a game, I would think about keeping the big meaty unit off the board for them to drop in turn 2 or turn 3. As assault marines are generally better against clearing chaff, I'd strongly think about dropping them in turn 2 to shred a lot of the enemy's outlying forces and hopefully reduce their screening units. We'd think about coordinating the drop with any characters that were on the table, or maybe think about dropping a captain or something alongside them if I've invested in a jump pack captain or characters to buff them. We'd use one or more of the various tricks we've discussed to give them a boosted charge to get that reliable charge in close combat, and then I'd be really looking to try and do something gamey, like charging one unit, destroying another, and then piling into the other one to wrap their model in close combat. If you put 3 models equally spaced in base contact around a model in a unit, then they won't be able to fall back unless they have special tricks such as fly to do so. If the enemy can't fall back, then the enemy won't be able to shoot your assault squad in your next turn, which is great because, as it goes, they're a fairly fragile unit at 15 points for just one regular power armoured model. We'd certainly also think about using our pile-in move to tie up any enemy tanks or other enemy infantry that can't fall back and shoot, and just put a few spanners in the works of the enemy's plans. From there we'd go on engaging targets of opportunity, particularly taking out light infantry and tying enemy units up. I don't necessarily suspect they'd survive all of this bravery, but if they're not, then hopefully they've taken some of the damage for other units in your army that your enemy would have attacked otherwise. In terms of small harassing squads, if I were using them, I would strongly consider whether or not I want to start them on the board or keep them in deep strike reserve. If they're starting on the board, deploy them out of line of sight and get ready to move up and potentially charge isolated enemy units, or to move forward in cover and capture objectives. If they're starting off the board, you could think about bringing them down onto objectives to score them, or engage other light infantry. So overall, my opinion of the assault squad in terms of competitive play is unfortunately not very good. I feel that the small harassing units, bike squads, will generally do you better as they put out a murderous amount of bolter fire while doing their thing. And in terms of the big units that drop in and cause a lot of damage while buffed by stratagems and characters, you're generally going to be better off with Vanguard veterans, or perhaps even with Terminators. I think Assault Marines are a fun unit. They're definitely one that you can include in a Space Marine list, and you can do very well with them, but I just wouldn't recommend that you take them to tournaments in place of some of those other units. In my opinion, Games Workshop need to reduce the points cost of the Assault Marines, maybe just make their jump packs free altogether, and we might see them seeing play. Until then though, I just think that these other units sadly outshine them for the role. I would very much like to see the balance restored. Please let me know if you have any opinions on the matter, or of course as usual if I've made any rules mistakes in the video. I think that Assault Marines are definitely an interesting and challenging unit to use, so any opinions are welcome. As always, thanks for listening to another Auspex Tactics video. Like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next one.